To put it bluntly, the show where the Canna-Curious go for straight talk on cannabis. On this podcast, Cannabis and Parenting.
We're all supposed to have that talk with our kids about sex, alcohol, but now we have to add cannabis to the mix. So how do you have that talk? When do you have that talk? And even beyond kids, how do you deal with parents that you want to talk to about getting off of opioids or handling pain, right? So we're not really clear about that conversation all the time because there's old stereotypes that go with cannabis, and sometimes there's cultural taboos. So here today to join me in the studio, we have a great panel of guests who are all parents or talk to a lot of parents. And they'll be joining us to shed some light on how we do that. And I'm also a mom. My kids are grown now, so I have a few stories about how I used to keep this underground. So that's one of the reasons we're here today, because it's no longer an underground conversation, right? But I'm really curious to know, what is the toughest moment anybody's had about this? I think, Lisa, you had something you were sharing with us a little earlier about your garden. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So we have a garden that we obviously work on every year. And for the past, I want to say 4 years, we've been growing cannabis in our garden. And this is the first year we've put them in ground. We've always had them in pots because, quite frankly, it's just, even though we live in Santa Cruz and it's a very accepting community, there's still that awkward moment of having play dates over or having that second-year-old birthday party where it's kind of odd to have the plants just out in the open. So this is the first year that we've had them in the ground, not in pots where we can move them, because we're feeling like it's time now. We're owning it. It shouldn't be a stigma. I want it to be something that my kids understand. It's medicinal. It's just like any other plant in the garden. We use it for a specific reason. And so this is the first year we're starting to have that talk. So I'm really excited to be a part of this panel because, quite frankly, with my oldest being 8, we're at that point now where I need to have a more specific conversation, and quite honestly, I'm not totally sure how to navigate it. Likewise, my parents have come full circle and are now embracing cannabis, so I've been having some interesting conversations with them as well.
Well, I think that happens a lot, right? I don't know about you, but for me, at least, my kids are in their 20s, and when they were younger, let's say, 10 years ago, I used to smoke in the garage, and then I wouldn't go out of the garage, so the only thing I had to do was clean the garage. So, that's not really the way you want to do anything recreationally. It's not like, let's, get high and clean. So, I mean, we don't do that anymore, but, it is tough to talk about this. And so I'm curious to hear what ages you think kids should be brought into the conversation. When are they curious enough, or do you wait till they're curious?
Well, I've had situations where I have kids and I have grandkids, so of all ages. So it's really been interesting because my kids are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. So it's really interesting to watch how they react to it.
What are they doing?
Some are good, some are bad. Well, we were trying to figure out how to use a vape pen, my husband and I. We had no idea how it worked. And so we called in my grandson, because he knew how, and my son, and said, okay, does somebody know how to use this thing? What does it do? How does it light? I don't even know what it does. And then someone, my stepdaughter walked in, and she was incredibly upset.
Really?
And at one point, we would have all been hiding under the table, but we all turned around and said, then you need to probably leave the room, because this is something that we all think is okay, and if you don't, then that's okay too. But this is our situation. But I didn't want to disrespect her, but it was, right. You're having to have these conversations now, and it's not always comfortable.
Right. So I'm curious to hear from the doctor too. I know you have people who come in and they want to talk, and it sounds like we're having family talks, really.
Right.
What are you hearing? What do people say?
Yeah, I have a lot of patients who are uncomfortable with how to sort of broach their own use of cannabis as medicine with their loved ones, or they want their mom to use it for her ailments, or their dad to use it, but their parents aren't comfortable. And then, I also have patients who come in, like their child is actually the patient, so they're ready to use cannabis with their kids, but they don't. Even for them, it's hard to sort of explain to the kid, like, why we're here, why we're using this plant. And so for me, I feel like this conversation is always sort of about normalizing. And for usually when I'm coaching people to talk to others when they're maybe not comfortable about opening this topic, I tell them, talk about it in the way that, how has cannabis helped you? Right, we're not coming at it from a, hey, I use cannabis. It's like, I have a lot of pain, or I have a lot of nausea. I don't like the way opioid medications make me feel, or anti-anxiety meds make me feel crazy, or my sleep meds, like I feel like a zombie the next day. But when I medicate with cannabis, I feel 100 times better. I can attend to my day, but I don't have pain. So I coach them to talk about it in the way that, how does it help you? And that's always where you should start the conversation.
I've shifted it from being about getting stoned to being a more broad usage opportunity or product that is has all these medicinal aspects to it that are amazing and that can be good for every type of age. It's for certain things. So it used to just always be about, oh, the high, getting high. Right. And now it's, I break into conversations based on what you said, what it's doing for me and how much it's helped me and how much it's helped children that I know that have had cancer and are dealing with that aspect, and how many people that I know that it's really helped. So it changes. They instantly, their guard kind of steps down a little bit.
You had a conversation, Sarah, with me earlier about your mother, right? And was there anything that you were able to say to her about using a topical over something that she ingested that encouraged her to feel like it was okay, or was she automatically embracing the idea anyway because she was coping?
Yeah. Well, my mom started using it as a response to the pain that she was feeling, and sort of the opioids weren't helping as we wanted them to. We wanted her to have not the side effects she was feeling as well. And so one interesting facet of my mom embracing cannabis as a therapeutic use was the opportunity that we had then to talk with all of her peer group about why this decision was made. We were able to have a huge set of conversations with her generation about facts, about research, about data, and showcasing her as an example of somebody that was helped by this legitimate plant that was in a form factor that could help her. So I was really energized by just her coming out, even the way you talk about it. It's like you kind of have to come out from under the rock into the open, and then you have this opportunity to start having so many more interesting conversations about it.
But I am very interested in this idea of topicals, being a way in for people. It's almost like topicals, tinctures, and then, okay, maybe I might ingest something.
Right.
I don't know, is that something you find as a doctor?
Yeah, absolutely. And even for my own mother-in-law who has some arthritic pain, I felt like she should be on cannabis, but I knew she wouldn't necessarily be totally open to starting with like ingesting or inhaling. So I gave her a topical for Christmas. I was like, hey, use this. But yeah,
Stocking stuffer.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think a lot of patients are more comfortable because it feels like medicine, and they want it to feel like medicine because to a lot of people there is still the difference between, there's like marijuana that you use to get high and there's cannabis you use to feel better, which to me it's sort of all one and the same, but they feel much more comfortable with medicine comes as a topical that I can put on my skin, or medicine comes as a tincture or as a capsule. And so those are sort of easier ways for them to get into this world of medicine.
And in those conversations with the entire family, I think you can pick pieces of that. So we can pick the gardening piece for the younger generation, where they really understand this is how the plant is grown and this is how I can help. And then also show them how that turns into medicine, and then have that with the other medicines in the house so they know what they can and can't access just as they would with any other medicine. So we have the opportunity here to really change this conversation and embrace this plant, and not have this next generation come up with the same set of stigmas or misinformation that we do. It doesn't have to be a landmine.
Well, okay, so we're talking about it in terms of medicine, but really the elephant in the room is it's recreational too for a lot of people. So do you handle it the same way you would handle alcohol? Or do you handle that conversation like when you're ready, the sex conversation, it should be with someone you trust,
It should be like that, though.
Okay, well tell me how it should be then, Lisa.
I think it should be. I mean, so my husband's a big fan of Coors Light, right? And my oldest really loves, I know. He loves making costumes. So he made this costume for my husband out of one of his beer boxes. Beer Man. It's like, we can talk about Beer Man like it's no big thing. Like, Beer Man's like a character in our house, but little do we talk about what
Blunt
really helps Mom, who is a professional working mom of 3, doing her thing every day, making it happen, coming home, and so what? I feel like we're finally at that point now in our family and in our culture where it shouldn't need to be that taboo. It should just be one other tool in the toolbox, like you and I talked about, in terms of medical, in terms of stress relief, in terms of creative energy. You know, a lot of the stuff that we do is, you know, doing headlining and naming and fun creative stuff. Sometimes, okay, here's where the recreational thing comes in. You know, I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's stress relief, but also sometimes it's just that creative spark that sometimes I need at the end of the day if I need to do something that's creative and fun and energizing.
And when you talk to your kids about this, like, it gives them the chance to understand that, oh, I can use it for like stress relief, or I can use it for creativity. Like, they learn how to use it responsibly and for a purpose, as opposed to, like, when we keep it in the dark, just like with alcohol, right? We tell kids, no, you can't have alcohol. So, like, the high schoolers are out binge drinking at their parties, right? Because we haven't taught them how to use it responsibly.
And what the effects are, like you said, the positive effects.
Right, exactly.
And to be cautious of any negative effects. I mean, making sure they understand it.
Right.
And they understand the effects of it.
There's some normalization that you're talking about, but it's interesting because I grew up in both sides of this story. I had a parent who would actually invite us to try at, when we were teenagers, his stash, right? But with the caveat that we couldn't go out and drive. So that meant that we had to stay in the house and we would play Scrabble and fall asleep. You know, and it's like, oh man, this is boring. Who wants to do this? But on the other hand, I had another parent who, if there was a whiff of anything in the house, you basically got threatened with being thrown out of the house, right? So guess where I wanted to live? But I think those extremes still exist in a lot of households, you know, and I don't really know how we change that part of it. Let's face it, moms talk on playgrounds, moms talk at schools, and to me, a lot of this starts with moms. It really does. I don't know if you feel differently, but
a little bit of grandmas too, because I know that
grandma, there you go.
my sisters were, who I've sort of been working hard to get into the fold, and they were at a grocery store a couple weeks ago here in town, and they were talking. There was 2, which we would call older. We're older, but they were even more older, probably in their 70s, and they were talking about pains and aches and blah, blah, blah. And so my other 2 sisters walked over to them, and they started to talk to them, and then they said, have you heard about treating it with cannabis? And they had this full, very lively conversation in the produce department, and just struck up a conversation about this, and 2 generations just sort of went, oh, yay, we're gonna talk about
What
it.
we're missing is those places we can all come together and talk about it, and like we've been talking about on all of your episodes, where's that friendly environment?
Well, even though I'm in a state where the plant material is perfectly legal, and in a business where it's perfectly legal, it's, you know, again, sort of that the stigma in the national conversation is not always for it, right? So I've been surprised a few times at the conservative nature of, for example, an attorney. If you ask an attorney to take on your business and then they realize what you do, you end up getting a talking to about being a dealer instead of understanding how you're really trying to help, help pain and other ailments with this plant material.
Well, and I think that's a good point that you bring up, Sarah, because the legalization issue is spotty and changing. And when we have these conversations, I mean, I did read about someone in San Diego who, was arrested for smoking around his kids. And that to me is really distressing, because there are people doing all kinds of bad things around their kids that are far worse in my mind, and they're not getting arrested, and then being threatened with having their kids taken away from them for being poor parents, right? So I don't know how that conversation changes. And I know I just took it there. It's like, well, now it's laying on the table. But what can we do about that? Other than legalization, I mean, it's a little dangerous to have some conversations with your family. And so do you have to tell your kids, listen, this is how our family feels about it. This is within our walls. Do we do we scare them in some way not to take it outside of the family? You know, what do you think?
Gosh, I don't know.
That's such a good, and I was asking her the same question because you've really had the talk with your kids, and your kids understand what you do that benefits people. And I was asking her, I was kind of grilling her, like, so has one of your kids ever like said something that then came back in a parent conversation? Because I know how the moms in my school kind of, and everybody talks and people know what each other do and how much are you volunteering? We live in a very Pinterest pressured, I'm a better mom than you are kind of world, and that makes it really difficult. So you have a wonderful job, you do great things, yet do you or do you not sort of hide what you actually do?
Well, I anonymize it a bit for the purposes of the culture that they live in, right, to help buffer their experience. So I will tell them that we make patches and that I'm a patch maker and how we do that and that plants are medicine, but we talk about the cannabis plant as the girls. I'm not sure they know the word cannabis, so they talk about we're growing the girls.
The conclusion of our advice to, proceed with caution, or is there more that we can add there? Anybody want to add a piece of advice, or one thing that they would hope that our viewers might do or consider in having the conversations on both ends of the parenting scope?
Yeah, again, not to be redundant, but I'm a huge proponent of really talking about the benefits and the good things of this plant, because we're so used to hearing the war on drugs and the propaganda around that, and there's no good use, right? This is a Schedule I drug. There's no medicinal benefit, which we all know is not true. And any patient out there who's used cannabis as medicine, or any person out there who's used cannabis recreationally, can tell you that no, this is beneficial, and I am getting good out of this. So really, putting the conversation in terms of the benefit that you're getting from this, and also, not to sort of bash the conventional medical system, but I think a lot of people are turning to cannabis because they haven't done well with our conventional medications. So sometimes even talking about why you want to use cannabis instead of these other medicines that you've maybe been put on because they don't make, put upon, exactly. A lot of times they have, unfortunately. But, talking to people, because a lot of us understand, like, oh, you didn't feel good on your pain meds. Oh, you didn't feel good on your anxiety meds. We get that. And so when people can say, I didn't feel good on those, I'm trying something else, it's making me feel a lot better, people, like you said, like, it's hard for people to be like, that's not true. Like, they can't tell you that your experience wasn't real and that you're not feeling better. And you can see it. Like, she looks a lot healthier now, So really putting the conversation in those terms.
Well, this is a startup industry, and so we're going to have to take that plane off the edge of the cliff and build our parachute on the way down, right? I mean, we just don't have all the answers right now, and that's okay. We need to embrace this experience and this time and start having those conversations, and I think we might be surprised at the end of the day how much good comes out of talking about it.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories. They were wonderful. I hope that people have taken away some good advice and some things that they can do to change their conversations with their kids or their parents. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.